Hello, everyone. You're listening to the Writing Docs podcast, where we discuss how businesses can help their teams to become better and more confident writers.
And we'll reveal the writing secrets that college forgot to teach you. So, who is your audience? In this episode, we'll help you figure that out and show you how to conduct an audience analysis that is critical to all communication. Plus, you'll learn how to calm presentation anxiety in this episode's doctor's diagnosis. Welcome to the podcast, Peter.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
Now, for those of you listening, Peter has worked in publishing for about 15 years, has had his own podcast on public speaking, tips and techniques. He's now been a professional public speaking coach and trainer for almost 19 years, and he published the book, The Captivating Public Speaker: Engage, Impact, and Inspire Your Audience Every Time, which is getting incredible reviews on Amazon and has also won numerous awards, including being a finalist for 2023's International Business Book of the Year. Today, we're talking with Peter about how you can take your written documents and oral presentations to that next level through audience engagement, creating clear visuals, and storytelling. Peter, we are so thrilled to have you here and excited to maybe get some free advice on our delivery as well.
I'll do all that I can to help with that.
Wonderful. Well, I know part of your work really is puts an emphasis on engaging your audience. And I think this is true for both oral presentations, but also in written documents. And there are three elements that you discuss in your book that I feel are really applicable to both mediums. And that's simplifying, suggesting the audience do something, and providing visuals. So let's start with simplifying. What
Sure.
do you mean by simplifying? Because some people might hear simplifying and they think, for lack of a better term, quote unquote, dumbing down, but that's not really true.
No, it's not at all. And let's look at Warren Buffett.
Okay.
Just about everybody in your audience will know Warren Buffett. If he hadn't given away the majority of his fortune, he'd still be the richest man on the planet. When he speaks, and this they might not know, he simplifies things because for two reasons. One is he doesn't want to make something so complicated that he may lose his audience, that they might not hear a word and therefore misjudge what he's saying, not understand what he's saying. But he also wants to make it easy for them.
Hmm.
And as he puts it, when he writes his presentation out, he has his sister in mind. Now, his sister was not in business. She was a teacher. So she was no dummy. He wasn't dumbing it down. He was just making it so anybody could understand what he was saying without working at having to figure it out.
I
And
love
truthfully,
that.
if it was good enough for Warren Buffett, it's probably good enough for most of us.
I love that. And really thinking about that kind of ties in with the next part, which is thinking about your audience and really focusing on them and their needs when you're giving a presentation or when you're writing something. And I know we're going to get into that in just a second. I'm excited about that part.
So, Peter, since audience is so important here, how do we know when we need to simplify concepts for our audience and when we need to leave something alone in its complexity?
That answer really comes from the research you do on your audience. I'll give you an example. I was working with a research scientist from one of the major universities in the Northeast, and I kept saying, you've got to simplify things, bring it down, make it easier to understand. Not that your audience won't understand you otherwise, but again, why make them work that hard? And he kept saying to me, although he was trying to simplify it, he'd justify the complication with, or as he'd say, sophistication, with, well, I'm speaking to other research scientists. So they understand exactly what I'm saying. And truthfully, Peter, in my industry, if you don't show how smart you are, the other scientists will think you're not that smart. And I'm thinking, wow, we're taking this to a level I don't comprehend, that we have to prove to each other in the room how smart we are. Again, let's go back to Warren Buffett. He's not trying to do that. However, this particular research scientist ended up interviewing at a school out in the Midwest where he was going to develop that particular university's system, the curriculum for what he researches. No one in the room was a research scientist. They were
Mm.
all admins. And if he didn't know how to simplify what he was saying, he would have spoken right over their heads. So a lot of it, well, just about everything we do on stage and writing has to do with the audience. We make this mistake of thinking it's about us. And believe me, it's not.
Are you saying we're being too selfish, Peter?
I I think we get carried away with I'm the one up here in front of everybody. I'm the one in the spotlight. It's all about me. And I like to joke around, although it's not really that much of a joke. I like to joke around with the fact that there was one person on this earth who would listen to me speak, and I've been speaking for 37 years now, who would come just to hear me because it was me, and that was my mom. Well, my
Oh.
mom died about 20 years ago. So for the last 20 years, there's no one on this planet who would come listen to me because it's me. My wife, who's my best friend, won't even do that. She's heard me way too many times. So the fact is, people are there for them, not the
Mm,
speaker. Do they want us to be entertaining, engaging, help them? Sure. But that's because they're there for them.
Mm.
yeah,
And
and
we
that's
have to
not
keep that in mind.
it's not necessarily selfish, just human nature, right? We have to
Human
think
nature.
about ourselves and what is the value of something for us. And I think so we have to analyze our audience. We know that's important. We have to analyze what their value
Huge.
is, how we appeal to them. And I think that's part of your amped framework. Now, I
It
won't
is.
ask you to give away everything. If you listeners want to learn about the whole amped framework, you can go read Peter's book. But I will ask you, what does it stand for and how does audience play a role in it?
AMPed is an acronym for audience, message, and by message, I mean your overall point that you're trying to get across. Your presentation, the actual presentation itself, structuring that, and then delivery.
Mm.
And with my clients and in my book, I go over each one of those segments so you can make a comprehensive presentation that's simplified, that's direct and engaging because it's based on the audience as opposed to what we're trying to accomplish in our own heads.
Hmm. So, how do we analyze audience?
There's various ways, but in my system, I have 6 questions, and there can be more, or you could just use a few of these, but I like to have my clients use all 6. And they go from what's the scoop? And the scoop is, again, an acronym for situation, challenge, occasion, opportunity, or problem. Generally, we're speaking to satisfy one of those, if not more than one of those. There could be a problem and an opportunity. It could just be an occasion, like you're brought in to speak on the company's 50th anniversary. Why are we here in the first place? Why is this taking place? And the second thing is who'll be in the audience. And that matters because we have to resonate with them. Now, when I speak, I often have people like financial people in an audience at a corporation, and I have IT people in the same audience, and I have marketers in the same audience. None of those people think alike. So I can't present it just the way I want to present it. And my background is marketing. So I gravitate towards the marketers. I can't just speak to them for the 60 or 90 minutes or whatever. I have to come up with stories and anecdotes and analogies that resonate with each of those three. I might have to give more than one analogy, say, but I have to make sure it resonates. Otherwise, I'm losing part of my audience. You've got to know who's in your audience. Then we often tell people what they need to know, the nuts and bolts. But either one of you, give me your favorite artist, your favorite singer.
Sarah's got a couple.
I like old school singers. I like John Denver.
Okay, let's say he was still around and you drop the ridiculous money these people ask now to go to their concerts, and you're saying, "Oh, I wanna hear all these great songs, uh, Country Road, Annie's Song, all these different songs that he made so popular and people love," yet he only played his new stuff, none of the old standards. I
I would be
bet you'd
sad.
be a bit disappointed.
Mhm.
Like, I'm a huge
Absolutely.
Eric Clapton fan, and I've been to dozens of his concerts. If I left his concert and he didn't play Layla, I'd be a little ticked. Now, the poor guy's been playing it for 51 years now. It's like, okay, are we gonna give him a break? No. My point here is there's what we need to know. So from an artist point of view, the new music, so we download or get in one way or another, get their music. But we also have what we want to know. So
Mm,
when we're speaking and writing as well, we often want to just give people the facts, the nuts and bolts and everything else, the stuff they need to know. But
mhm.
what you also want to satisfy is what they want to know.
Interesting. And that really shapes everything for how we put together with our how we put together our presentation, because again, if you have different audiences, different analogies for different audiences. Now, how do we then channel that in an audience where we may not know who the audience is going to be? We might not necessarily know what they're made up of marketers or of scientists or things like that. What advice do you have
Well,
there?
I'll give you that answer, but let me just give you the other questions quickly. One is, how do you want to make them feel? We very seldom give thought to that. And people said, well, this is a business talk. Yeah. Long before they were business people, they were people.
Mhm.
And we are emotional animals, whether that's at the conscious level or the unconscious level. We are emotional animals. So how do you want to make, do you want them to be confident in you so they're confident in what you're saying and sharing with them? How do you want to make them feel? Do you want to think of a pep rally? Do you want to get them excited? What's the emotion going on? Then there is the one that a lot of people just give no thought to. And you'll hear this come up a lot as we talk. How do you want them to be transformed?
Mhm.
They've got to be transformed. Otherwise, why did we have this?
What do you mean by transformed, Peter?
Okay. Uh, I'm sure both of you have been to a meeting at one time or another in your lives where you walked out an hour later saying, why in God's name did we have this meeting?
So
I
often, so many
I'm
times.
I'm gonna plead the fifth. I don't know about you, Elizabeth, but if our boss is watching,
I was in academia. There were a lot of meetings where you walked out and you're like, "Why was that a thing? Why was this not an
I
email? Why
agree.
did you force me?"
I
Yeah,
agree.
when I got out of school, I spent 9 years at a major corporation, and there were so many times of they could have just sent back then it would have been a memo or something, but they didn't. Yeah, we can do it by email with PDFs now. Why are we having a meeting for this? And that's
Mhm.
because we left the same way as we went in, just with some information that again we could have just read somewhere. So if they're not transformed in some way, why bother to have a presentation?
Hmm.
They have to
Interesting.
leave somewhat different. Now that might be, and that leads to the last question, what do you want them to do now? Do you want them to think differently? Do you want them to go physically do something? Do you want them to take advantage of an opportunity? What, and that's the call to action. What, now that you've spoken for 30 minutes, 45 minutes, 60 minutes, what do you want those people to go and do? Otherwise, again, why did we even have this?
So then let's go back to my question about what
Mhm.
if you're not sure who's going to be in your audience? You're not sure what their demographics are. How do you then approach doing all those things you just discussed with them? Do you sort of try to tap into the higher consciousness or how do we do that?
It depends, but usually, not every time, but usually we can find out who's in the audience and what their thoughts are by asking, well, first of all, them. When I'm hired to speak, the first thing I ask the meeting planner, whoever that may be, whether it's an actual meeting planner or someone in a corporation or a school or wherever, is I ask those other questions. Why are we even doing this and the like? But then I say, can I speak to some people who will be in the audience? And I want a variety. So if there are going to be people from different departments, I'd like to speak to people in different departments. I'd also like to speak to the champions, the people who go, I love this topic. I can't wait for him to come in and do this. I also want to speak to the people who say, oh my God, another consultant coming in, just wasting our time. I wish I could just be golfing instead. I wish I could rather have a root canal than have to sit there. I want to speak to them too, not to change their mind, but to know why they feel that way.
So, in other words, if you're going to be presenting or writing, do your homework.
Do your
Don't
homework. Isn't
just
that
don't
funny?
just put together an outline and some visuals, right? Although that's important too, but really do your homework. Find out as much as you can.
Yeah, those things are important. But if you don't have the foundation, well, let me ask you this. Could we go outside your offices or your homes, wherever you are now, and out on the street and build a house right in the middle of the street? Could we do that?
You're
Sure.
not
No.
supposed to.
Not supposed to. But people say, no, you can't do that. No, we got asphalt. Asphalt's strong. We can build a house and it'll be perfectly fine for about 3 months. Then it'll start to sag and the doors won't close and the windows won't open and we'll have cracks in the wall and the plumbing will crack and we'll have all this mayhem. But if we build a solid foundation, we'll have that house for years to come. We can't build a presentation that's going to resonate with people, that's going to transform people, unless we have a solid foundation on which to build our presentations.
I like that.
That solid foundation has to deal, I think your amped uh, strategy helps build that solid foundation, as well as the acronym. You called it SCOOPed?
Yes, scoop.
Scoop, that helps as well. Are there other aspects we need to keep in mind when building this foundation?
Hmm.
Everything points back to the answers of those 6 questions and others if you have them. And that's when you come up with your point. What's your point for this presentation? What are you getting across to them? What's going to help them? So that's your major point. And then as you build your talking points based on that major point, that main point, again, pointing back as a compass or a yardstick or a North Star, whatever you want to call it, pointing back to that all the time. And as Faulkner said to his students, William Faulkner said to his writing students, kill your darlings.
Mm.
Right?
I always
So
wondered if it was Faulkner or Stephen King who said that, but it was Faulkner.
it was Faulkner while he was teaching his
Probably
students,
both, knowing Stephen
and probably
King's
someone
writing.
before him. So, it's just
Probably.
attributed to him as far as I know. He got it from somewhere, I'm sure. But when it doesn't point back to that North Star, it does not belong in the presentation.
You also talk about the importance of asking your audience to do something. What
Mhm.
is the benefit of asking them to do something? How does that tie in
En-
with everything?
Engagement. If your
Hmm.
audience isn't engaged, you can do a song and dance up there. It's not going to make much of a difference. They must be engaged. And when you tell people, especially once they are engaged, and that's not as difficult at the beginning of a presentation as some people think. And once you have their engagement, it's yours to lose. But if you lose it, it's a long, long road back. And you might not
Very
have enough
true.
time to ever get it back. So when you tell people, once they're engaged, write this down, a certain number will. Others won't, but they'll still listen intently. Think about this. Imagine that. When you
Mm.
tell people to do small things, they'll go along and do it with you. It's kind of like Simon Says or hypnotism.
Oh,
So you're not just talking about a call to action at the end of a presentation. You're wanting to give them things to do throughout.
Yes. And not old
I
school, everybody stand up and shake out your arms and God forbid, rub the shoulders of the person next to you and
I
all
hate
those old
that.
school things that thank if there's one great thing about COVID, it's that stuff is no longer tolerated.
Oh, I used to hate that. It's like, "Don't touch me. I don't know you. I don't wanna touch you. This is a violation of every boundary in me."
I'm an introvert. I'm an extreme introvert, and more than that, I'm shy.
Mhm.
And as my wife would tell you, put me next to a woman, I'm even shyer. So I can distinctly remember when I was about 40, someone said this, and next to me was about a 25-year-old young lady. And all I could think of was the last thing this woman wants in the world at this moment is for me to touch her.
Mm.
Yeah.
And I didn't. And believe me, she didn't turn to me and go, "No, go ahead, massage my shoulders." No, we just left it at that. So you don't want to do that to introverts and shy people, and you definitely don't want to make people feel awkward.
That goes back to audience analysis, right? Because especially for our listeners, they're tech people, pharmaceutical people, engineers. Yes, there are some outgoing people in those groups, but a lot of times we do
Mhm.
have a lot of introverts, and we have to be mindful of our audience and try. We want them to do things. We want them to think. We don't necessarily want to make them squirm, perhaps.
Yeah,
Exactly. Yeah. For when you're trying to engage people, you don't want to make them feel odd.
Mhm.
yeah. Now, as Elizabeth said, we do work with a lot of folks in engineering and pharmaceutical and tech. And I actually have taught our presentations course. And I've had them ask me, the folks in these courses, ask me about presenting data to clients or colleagues. And we hear a lot of them say, well, that's what I'm doing. I don't necessarily want my clients or the colleagues to do anything, management to do anything. I'm just informing them. What do you think of that? Is anything ever just informing? If so, or if not, how do we make it a good, engaging presentation?
I guess, I don't think anything's in a vacuum and always has to be a particular way. So are there times that you can just inform? I guess so. But it seems to me when you inform someone, it's logical to expect them to say, "What do I do with this information?"
Hmm.
And once you answer that question, and if they have that question, you really should answer it, whether they ask it or not. You should know if they're probably going to be thinking that. Once you do that, it's no longer just informing.
It's a good point.
You've
Yeah.
entered the world of transforming. As soon as they wonder,
Ah.
what am I going to do with this? And if the answer is, I don't know, I just wanted you to have the information, send me a PDF.
So
Right.
really, if we can't figure out a way to transform, it should have been a memo or or an
Yeah.
email.
uh,
That is interesting.
I tell my clients it's really bad when we've all been there, like we said earlier, when you're in a meeting and you say, "I'll never, ever, ever get this hour back in my life. What a complete waste of time. Peter wasted my time." What's worse is to have people thinking that in a meeting and you're the one presenting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Make sure you make a difference in their lives, even for that meeting.
Hopefully you're not thinking that right now with us as we chat.
No, we'll be transforming people. Already we are.
It's interesting too because this concept of transforming people feels like this big ask. I have to transform my listeners, but when you were talking, it's as small as saying, "Here's what I want you to do with the information," or "Here's what's
Mhm.
important about this information. Here's how it matters to you." That doesn't feel so big. That feels like I could do it in a sentence. This data indicates that we need to do further experiments.
Mhm.
That's not that hard, but it
No.
is a form of transformation, and I think that that's important to point out. It doesn't feel so all-encompassing,
Overwhelming.
overwhelming. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the term transforming people is like, "Oh my god, there's gonna be a huge difference." No, it's as simple, like you said, it's as simple as answering the question, "What do you want me to do with this? Now that I have this information, what do you want me to do?"
Mhm.
And if you can't answer that, now we have a different discussion.
Mm.
That also helps with engagement, I think. And another engagement aspect that you talk about in your book is using visuals in order to
Mhm.
be understood and to create engaging presentations. And I think this is true for writing as well. We like pictures. I guess we never grew up out of the picture book phase when we were little. We still like pictures. And it's great to use pictures to show rather than just tell your readers or your audience what you're saying. But Peter, I've seen some awful visuals, some truly horrible visuals that made the speaker and the writer's messages much more convoluted and hard to understand and lost me as a reader. So, how do we create clear and engaging visuals? What makes for a good visual? What makes for a bad visual?
Wow, that's a huge question, and you're right. We've seen so many bad we don't know what's wrong with them necessarily, but we look at them and say, "This isn't working," when someone else may be presenting. But what do we do when we're asked to give a presentation? Pretty much do the same thing because that's what we see. You know, 10 bullet points, and each bullet point is 18 words long, that type thing, or God forbid, actual paragraphs on a slide. But we often do these things even though we know they don't work because we don't know what else to do. A visual, for the most part, a visual should be simple. I have a client where her visuals are anything but simple, and they can't be simple because she's talking about where gas lines cross each other in chemical plants. So she's building gas line on gas line because that's what they look like in real life. So they're somewhat sophisticated slides. But she also talks to a slide, a particular slide, for 10 or 15 minutes. It's not a slide that's up there for 10 seconds. So she's building and building and building because, again, that's what the actuality is. But what many of us do is we've heard the fact that a visual is often a graphic of some type, and then we completely ignore it.
Mm.
We put all these words on there, and what we're actually using it for is a poor person's teleprompter.
Oh,
And I said, no, that's not what a slide is for. A slide is not for you. That's called practice.
Mm.
A slide is for the audience. Think of this. If I had notes, I was looking for a piece of paper here on my desk, but nothing I could hold up. If I had notes about my presentation, would you want me to hold up the notes and show them to you?
oh, please don't.
No. That's what we're doing when we have all these words on a slide, and we're using them to help us remember what to say, to talk about, whatever. So a good, strong graphic is often the best. Not always, but often. Few words, if any. Again, sometimes there's the need, but few words, if any. And definitely not a bunch of bullet points or not. Uh, can I tell you a little story?
Please do.
I was invited. Someone from a particular school here in the Northeast invited me to this presentation. He said, "I think you'd want to come because it's the president of the communications, not the president, the head of the communication school is giving this presentation. There's only going to be 40 of us. Would you like to come?" I'd love to come. Always learn something. We love this. So we go, and when he's introduced, the head of the school, when he's introduced, he asked for the lights to be turned off, and it was pitch black in the room. And I thought, that's kind of odd. We're not going to be seeing, you know, a great movie. We are here to see a presentation. So I was kind of surprised he had the lights turned off. And then the projector comes on and he starts talking. And for the viewers who can see what I'm going to do, this is what we saw for the next just over 60 minutes. He turned his back and read slide after slide after slide after slide after slide after slide.
I was afraid that was where
63
this was going.
minutes. And so not only is this terribly boring because we can read a slide to ourselves much faster than anybody can read it out loud or would read it out loud, So you get to the bottom of the slide going, just get to the next slide so we can get out of here. And you have them in complete darkness, so you're fighting falling asleep while you're watching all this. The only thing I can tell you positively, well, surely, about this particular presentation is that the man is slightly balding
Oh,
because I looked at the back of his head for a little over an hour
Why do you think that he used that strategy?
because he
Was
doesn't
he
know any better. And that's what I said to the person, and we carpooled to this event. And he said, "What'd you think?" And I said, "I'll be brutally honest because I don't know what else to say here. It was horrible." I said, "How could he turn around? This is the guy who's the head of a communication school at a major university. How could he do that?" And he goes, "Well, in his defense, his background is writing." And I
no,
said,
no,
"Well, then
that's not a
before,"
defense. No, no. As
I
writers,
said,
no.
I said, "Before he goes out and does any more presentations, he should go audit a few classes on the other side of the communication school." It was
Yeah.
terrible. But so many of us do that. We put up this teleprompter, basically. Again,
Mhm.
I might as well just hold you up my notes and say, read along with me.
Hmm. I fell
It
into
doesn't
that
work that
trap when I first started teaching a few times. And I think you learn as you go to become more confident in your preparation and to become more confident in your ability to keep your audience engaged. So, what kind of visuals typically keep audiences engaged? You said there should be minimal words. Is it just pretty pictures, or what do you suggest?
No, it's got to be something that supports the point you're making at that moment, whatever that might be. For this particular client I talked about, it's colored lines that represent gas lines of different types. And so that's great for her. Others, it might be just an image that makes you remember something. But it's got to support your point. And if it doesn't support your point, again, why is it there?
Hmm.
Why are we having someone look at something if it's not supporting your point? So, and people go, well, what else? What else am I going to do? Just have a black slide and keep on talking. There's no such thing as a PowerPoint presentation. No such thing. There are PowerPoint slides, PowerPoint slide decks. No such thing as a PowerPoint presentation. You can turn PowerPoint off or put up a black slide when you don't need to have a slide up. I have a 90-minute presentation that I give quite often. It's customized each time, but the beginning and the end are very much the same each time. And I use some slides at the beginning and the end. Total of 4 that are all up. Each one's up for, I don't know, 30 seconds maybe at the outside in a 90-minute presentation. Other than that, that screen's black. So, because I don't
Interesting.
need slides, why for the rest of the time, why would I use them? If you have a need for them to help the audience, then use them. If you don't, don't. Simple example is if I was talking about Fuji apples, beautiful red apples, and I had a slide of beautiful red apples up there. Great. Now I start talking about oranges, but I don't have a slide of oranges. Why would I leave the red apples up there?
Mhm.
Just take them down. Go to your next slide, which in this case would be a black slide. So what I ask my clients each and every time, and myself when I'm doing a presentation, is okay, now that I have this slide, does it really need to be there? I'm not looking for reasons to keep it there. I'm actually looking for reasons not to have it. And sometimes I can't come up with enough good reasons not to have it. Then I leave it there. I'm not looking for any little glimpse of a reason to go, ooh, now I can have it there to help me. If it's to help me is the answer, it's going.
I think there's, at least when I've talked to clients, there's been this feeling of, well, I want to give them as much information as possible, and then they can choose what to do with the information. I'm going to put it all out there. They get to choose. What do you say to the people who ascribe to that?
There's an old saying about trying to give a person a drink of water from a fire hose.
Oh,
I'm just trying to give them a drink of water. They're parched. They're thirsty. They want a little drink of water. I'll turn a fire hose on them. They're not going to get any water. They're going to be overwhelmed by the stream of water. So you have to help them. You have to simplify. You have to make it easy for them. And I agree with if you want them to be able to take away what they need to take away, but you can't just keep dropping stuff on them and say, okay, you've got to sift through all that. That'd be like saying, yeah, my book is 246 pages long. I could have written an 800-page book that said very little more than my 246-page book says, but why would I do that? To
Mhm.
make them go through and sift out what means something to them? I'm the so-called expert. I did my research of what people wanted and needed to know, and I gave it to them. I didn't give them more. Again, kill your darlings, call things out. A professional presentation isn't adding more in, it's culling out what doesn't need to be there. So the important stuff stands on its own.
I think that relates to writing as well, because a lot of times, really smart folks, particularly in engineering, pharmaceuticals, and tech, they want to give everything possible. But you're right, it's much more effective when we call out stuff and the writer is the expert. So you decide what's necessary to include and pull out the rest so you're not, I guess, fire hosing your audience. I
Right.
guess that's a way to put it.
If 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 we were to leave stuff in so people could take what they need, I'm going to use it's an absurd analogy here, but stick with me. You're familiar with David, the statue
Oh,
in
yes.
Rome, 14 feet of granite, right? Beautiful, beautiful statue. Or it could just be a 14-foot square block, a rectangular block of granite, and say, imagine this great looking guy kind of in there. I'm just going to leave you all of this. I'm not going to chip it away to give you this beautiful David. I'm just going to leave the block, and you can imagine, you can take away whatever you want from that. Doesn't work. Like I said, it's absurd, but it's kind of accurate.
It
It's
makes
up to us as the
sense.
expert to give them David,
Yeah.
not leave a block and say, you take from it what you want.
And that really comes down to us using our critical thinking skills and thinking about our audience, what they need, what they want, what they're expecting to get from that. Let me ask you, you talk in your book about storytelling. Where does storytelling come into that? Because I've had engineers, for example, in preparing their presentations with data ask me, well, how am I supposed to include a story? It's data, it's just information, it's statistics. How do we incorporate data, or excuse me, how do we incorporate storytelling into something like that?
Well, it depends on what you want to do with that data. Notice we say that completely differently. With the data, is are we trying to just give them data? Are we trying to show that with this there's a result? Because let's say I'm a scientist of some type, technician of some type, and I say, well, this is what's going to happen when we do this. Well, there might be a story of someone else tried very much the same thing with this terrible result. Well,
Mm.
that can be told as in a story as opposed to just don't do that, it ends up badly. What's the story behind that? The person ended up losing their job, they got injured because of a bad reaction. What Tell us the story of what happened. That'll last with us much longer than the facts.
That's a
Was
good
the
point.
old
And
selling thing.
humans,
Facts tell, stories sell. We
Ooh,
remember stories. Can either one of you tell me the Three Little Pigs?
yeah,
sure.
Little Red Riding Hood,
Sure.
Goldilocks?
absolutely.
Sure.
Right. When's the last time you read it?
Oh, it's been a hot minute.
Yeah, right. Stories stick with us. Facts
Interesting.
do not.
You even talk a little bit in your book about there's neuroscience research behind stories being sticky, is how you call them. Can you tell us a little bit about that research? I believe it was with an fMRI machine.
Yes. Yeah. What it showed is that when someone is telling a story, their brain lights up, gets activated in certain spots. When someone is engaged in listening to that same story as someone's telling it, their brain gets active in the same spots. The
Hmm.
two brains couple temporarily, but they couple. And that's what we want to do. So much so that when someone is, quote unquote, sitting on the edge of their seat, think of in a movie theater or someone doing a great presentation, it's truly engaging. The one, the listener who's sitting on the edge of her seat, she's actually having her brain light up and get active in that spot just prior to the storyteller's brain lighting up in that spot with anticipation.
And I joked earlier about the tapping into the higher consciousness, but that's kind of what we're doing. We're syncing up our brains with our audience, is what you're saying.
It's exactly what it is. Stories do that. We tell stories. We're surrounded by stories, novels, movies, could even be a magazine article. Honey, how was your day? And other than the answer of, it was okay. A lot of times I ask my wife, how was your day? Oh, let me tell you about this situation at work.
Mhm.
And there's a story. We tell stories. If you want someone to listen to you, if you want someone to take away and retain as much as possible what you're saying, tell stories. Wrap your facts about that technical stuff in stories.
So, for stories, are there certain requirements that we need to be aware of in order to create an engaging story? Because we have seen, I'm sure we've all been in those meetings, those stupid meetings where we want that hour back of our lives. Someone tells a story, and you're like, why? Why did you do this? So, there are bad stories. What are
Oh,
some
they're horrible stories.
requirements? There are. And what are requirements of good, engaging stories?
There are different types of stories, different formats, just like most things in life. And the one that's used quite often is called a hero's journey.
Mm.
Now, depending on whose format you're looking at, that's anywhere from 8 to 12 particular steps, if you will. But within the hero's journey, you have the character gets exposed, you learn about that character, and the character has conflict. And that's one of the things we forget. We forget conflict. Well, take, I'll give you two. And these two are the same story when you break them down. The Wizard of Oz and Star Wars: A New Hope, the original Star Wars. They're the same story. You have
The
a
New Hope,
character
was that the
who's
good
going on a
one?
journey, who doesn't think they can make this happen, and then they have people assisting or characters assisting them. And then there's more conflict, things go wrong, and then ultimately in the end, there's a resolution.
That's
And the conflict wasn't only fighting a witch or fighting Darth Vader or whatever. The conflict was also in their mind. Am I the right person for this? Could I even accomplish this? That's what you want in stories, both the emotional conflict and the outward conflict. And then you want a resolution. And that's when we go, oh, I get it. I get the moral. There must be a moral of the story. Otherwise, why are you telling it?
hmm,
The story's got to mean something to me, the listener. So in that case, you've already done your homework. You know what they want and need to know. You know how you want to affect them emotionally. You want to know how you already know how they're going to be transformed and what you want them to do. The stories point to those particular things. I actually suggest to my clients that in most cases, they actually say at the end of a story, and the moral of the story is, or what that means to you, Ms. Marketer and Mr. CMO and UTech people, and actually tell them. Now, there are people in my field and say, well, if you tell the story well enough, you don't have to tell them the moral. Well, what if they were daydreaming just for a moment on a particular sequence that made all the difference? What if they came up with a moral from the way you told it that really doesn't make sense to them in that particular occasion? Go ahead and tell them what this story means to them.
I like that. You don't have to hide things. You don't have to assume, or you're going to insult your audience if you just tell them outright, here's what you should be getting from this. And it also does sound like you were referring to the good Star Wars movie. So that makes sense to me.
Yes.
So is that what you mean by using a story to educate, avoiding teaching inside the story? Explain what that phrase is.
Well, let's take The Wizard of Oz. What if I was telling the story of The Wizard of Oz, and in the middle of The Wizard of Oz story, I said, now about the witch, what they used for her skin to turn her skin green, and I started to go off on a tangent or explain that what I mean by a witch is not this, is this. And we start explaining things in the middle of the story. That takes away from the story. Don't go explaining it. If it's presented correctly and presented well, then you don't have to explain things like that. You can explain the moral at the end, but that's not inside the story. That's slightly after it. But some of us will stop and, "Oh, let me tell you what I mean by that." Well, that's probably not the place to do it. It interrupts the story and kills its effectiveness, or at least harms it a great deal.
So you've done a lot of different kinds of things when it comes to communicating. You present, you help people become better presenters, done writing, you've done podcasting. With all of that vast experience, what would you say is your number one rule for clear, concise communication? What sort of a
It's
mantra you live by?
it's always, always, always about the audience. It's not about us. We're nothing but a tool.
I like that. And it's very clear to the point too.
We're a vehicle to get something across to help the audience. A presenter, as far as I'm concerned, and I don't care if you're presenting across a desk to one person or in an auditorium to 18,000, makes no difference to me. You are there to serve. You're not there to be the star. You are there to serve others. You're presenting with a server's mind and a server's heart. You're there to make a difference in their lives. Now, that could be very grand. It could be very on a very small level, but you're there to make a difference to them in one way or another because that's why we got together. So it's always about them, not about you.
We're talking today with Peter George, who has lots of great nuggets of wisdom for us. I'm going to remember that about thinking about your audience and us being there to transform their lives. These are great takeaways for our audience. We've come to the part of our show where we ask the same questions of our guest to every single guest. So, are you ready for the big three questions? Drum roll,
I
please.
am.
Okay, the first question. What is one thing that you wish you'd been taught about writing or communicating that would have made your professional life easier?
Probably the two things we've been focusing on and about transforming people as well as serving them. But that all comes down to creating that foundation.
Hmm.
Many instances I was taught or led to, here's what you want to do with your presentation. When it's really their presentation and it's based on everything you learn about them prior to developing the presentation.
Oh, I love that. I love that. And that kind of ties in with the second question, which is a rule about communication that we hear a lot about, but that maybe doesn't necessarily serve our audience or serve you yourself as a presenter, as a communicator. Something that we hear about that just really isn't relevant in the real world.
When I first started writing and when I was writing my book and when I developed the publishing company, I wrote some of the articles for one of the magazines. You'd always read or hear from people, find a time to write every day from 9 to 11. Sit at your desk, even if you don't write anything, just sit there. And I tried that, and that didn't work for me whatsoever. If you want to drive me out of my mind, make me sit somewhere and not do anything. And what I found best for me was strike when the iron's hot. And it might not ever be hot during those times that I said I can sit at my desk every day at this time. I couldn't force it. But when it came, then it worked extremely well for me. Just like I tell my clients and the people who read my book, and it's in my book, make this the foundation, make this the fundamentals, and then go out and do it your way.
Mm.
Because what truly works for me to serve people in an audience might be a good start for you, but then you're probably going to have to change it a little bit and make it yours so you can better serve them in a way that you can, in a way that you like, in a way that you're comfortable, so it serves them more effectively.
I like that, customizing things to make them your own,
Mhm.
essentially. Third question: what is one thing you wish people knew about writing, specifically about when they are giving presentations?
Something they knew about writing when they're giving presentations?
Writing
Something
or
you wish they
communicating?
knew.
I'm sorry, yes, something you wish they knew.
Oh, something I wish they knew about giving presentations. Yeah, one, it's preparation, whether it's writing, whether it's speaking, any type of communication, because it's based on them and you want it to resonate on them. And we've beat this horse all throughout this, and it should, and I can revive a horse and beat it all over again. So you want the preparation and preparation to develop a presentation, but then preparation, rehearsal to deliver it. Many of us think I know what I'm talking about. I can get up and do this. Sure. But are you going to communicate on both the conscious level and the unconscious level, which is done every single time? Most of us think just about the conscious level, give very little thought to the unconscious level. Are you going to do that? Probably not. Are you going to have an opening because you know what you're talking about? Are you going to have an opening that grabs them, engages them, and allows you to serve them for the next half hour or whatever? Are you going to have a closing that really wraps everything up and has a call to action that affects them? Probably not. Most of us can't do that. I can't do it. It was funny. I was watching something last night where John Lennon was being interviewed not too long before he died. And he was being interviewed on a talk show, and they said, "Well, we would love for you to get up and play with the band." And he said, "I'm not going to do that." They said, "Why?" And he said, "Because I haven't rehearsed with them." And they said, "But you're John Lennon." He said, "Yeah. And the reason I generally put on a good performance is because I've rehearsed and rehearsed and rehearsed, and I have never rehearsed with your band." And he wouldn't get
Wow.
up and do it. So just because we have the knowledge doesn't mean we're prepared to go out and do it well in a way that positively affects the audience.
Peter, you mentioned the unconscious level. For
Mhm.
our listeners, can you briefly define what you mean by the unconscious level?
What are they reading from you without even realizing it? We do things ourselves on an unconscious level. We breathe, we raise our eyebrows as we talk without ever realizing we're raising our eyebrows. We do all different things. We stand a particular way, we use our hands a particular way. Those are being read. Now, the people in the audience, unless they're body language experts or just curious about things like that, are not sitting there saying, "Look at his eyebrows raise up at that point." It's kind of odd to say that and have your eyebrows raise up. They might not say, "Wow, he had his hands in his pockets the whole time he was speaking," but they might walk away and said, "Man, Peter seemed knowledgeable. I just wasn't comfortable with him. I have no idea why. I just wasn't comfortable." That's the unconscious. What's happening between the two of us without us even recognizing it's happening. I'll give you an example. If I go out on stage or in the front of a room, end of a conference table to speak, whatever it might be, and I get there and do what many of us do, which is stand on one hip. Well, you can see what just happened to my body. You don't even have to see my waist down to know I'm standing on one hip. My shoulders just tilted and I had to tilt my head the other way to have it straight on. This is not a confident look.
Mm,
People will say it's comfortable. It's not physically comfortable. And how do we know that? We don't have to be research scientists. We know that because what do they do 30 seconds later?
they shift.
They switch to the
Mm.
other hip. So it's not physically comfortable. It's actually mentally comfortable in that if I stand with my weight centered and my feet shoulder width apart, I feel imposing. I feel too confident. I don't want to look that way. So I'll soften it. Well, our
Mm.
audience doesn't want someone who's not looking confident because if they're not confident in me, why should they be confident in what I'm sharing? So I have to go out and stand with my feet shoulder width apart, weight centered. Yeah, I can move. I can't be pacing like a caged tiger, but I can move and then get where I'm going and stay there for a while. I can do things like that. But they might again say, I don't know why wasn't comfortable with him. I just wasn't. We have to be sure what we're communicating at that unconscious level is as strong, at least as strong, with what we're communicating on the conscious level. Problem is, we generally give thought only to the conscious level. And that's a huge mistake.
I'm suddenly feeling very self-conscious about my body language, so
Body
I'm just
language is
kidding.
incredible.
It
Sarah's now
is, it
sitting a little
is.
straighter and everything.
I go over that with my clients too about how you sit.
Mhm.
It's not just how you stand, because again, people read that. You're around a conference room table and the CEO's at the end of that table and she's looking around. She might not be saying, I gotta ask my VP who this guy is, this guy Peter at the end, because I don't know. I don't know if he belongs at this table or not.
Mm. Yeah, we're always communicating. I'm glad I asked you about that because our next segment is Doctor's Diagnosis, and we have an issue. Our Doctor's Diagnosis segment is where listeners and clients submit their writing and communication ailments, and we write prescriptions for their woes. So, our listener's communication ailment comes from a scientist at a pharmaceutical company, and they need some help. They write in that it's required at my organization that we have a PowerPoint presentation that we give to our colleagues at the end of every research project. We're supposed to say what we found, what the impact is, and what future research and experiments our findings could lead to. So my colleagues and I are presenting to each other a lot. I see my colleagues getting bored during my presentations, and I don't know how to stop them from getting bored. I think part of it is just we have so many presentations going on that we all get a little sick of them. But I don't want my presentations to be boring. I want them to be engaging and to get my colleagues excited about my research. Yet I don't know what I'm doing wrong. I've tried including anecdotes, but that didn't seem to work. I even tried adding in jokes to make them laugh, and that certainly didn't work. What should I do at this point?
The Well, let me start with this. The first part that I want to address is when he says, well, they say there might be too many presentations being given back and forth, and basically we're getting burned out and don't care. That is a fantastic opportunity because that means they're all at a particular level, probably. And if you rise above that level, you will get and keep their attention. The question
Mm.
is, how are you going to do that? Telling jokes, don't tell jokes. Include humor. Humor is huge, but don't tell jokes. Most of us aren't very good at telling jokes. Jokes is the crux of a joke is timing. And when we get nervous, our timing isn't all that strong. We aren't, for the most part, very good at telling jokes in our living room, let alone in front of other people on a stage or in the front of a room. Add humor, appropriate humor, and appropriate, I don't mean just not off color, but appropriate to that moment and to what you're trying to accomplish. Humor, I like humor in a presentation, in most presentations. And I work with some presidents and CEOs that always throw in humor because they want their employees to be relaxed and
Mm.
engaged, as opposed to I'm the CEO and I'm standing up and you have to sit there and listen. So they understand that and they include that. The other things I want to ask is, are you including stories? Anecdotes are great, but the difference between an anecdote and a story, for the most part, is an anecdote doesn't necessarily have conflict. A story must have conflict. An anecdote is often humorous, which is great. There's a little place to put humor, but a story has the moral and when you overcome that conflict, what the result can be and what that can do for you or your team or your company or the situation. So, do you want to add stories as opposed to just anecdotes? Also, how did you engage them at the very beginning? How are you opening? I like to open with a question because human beings answer questions. And the moment they answer a question, they're engaged. Now, I don't care if they're physically answering it or it's a rhetorical question. Either way, they're answering the question. So I open it with a question, and depending on that particular talk in that particular instance, I might follow it up immediately with a story that illustrates that question and the answer to that question. So it could be opening with a story, it could be opening with a question, a startling statistic. Problem with a startling statistic is being a trivia nut like I am. I think just about everything is startling and isn't the world interested in this? And then I say to my wife, listen to this. And she says, yeah, so what? We've got to be sure it's not startling to us, that it's startling to them in this particular situation. I often say there's all these different ways to open a talk, but in my book, there's a reason I address a question first and a story second, because I think those are the two strongest, especially when they're combined. So, how are you opening it? Are you grabbing their attention? When you get their attention, are you keeping it? Think of this, write this down, the things we talked about at the very opening. And then, how are you closing it? What's your compelling conclusion? And it can't be, well, that's my time, or that's what I got, or I wish I could share more. It's no, go do this, think this, make this different in your life. Give them something to do that is going to benefit them for the reason that they're there, and it'll happen. So, those are the things I'd want to know: the opening, the content, of course, the 3 points you're making shouldn't really often be more than 3 points, and how you're keeping them engaged and what you're having them do at the end.
That transformation element, it sounds like.
It's right back to transformation.
Now, Peter, how can people get in touch with you and learn more if they want to learn more about humor or more about presentations or get in touch with you about coaching?
Very simple. They can go to my website at Peter George, George, Peter George, publicspeaking.com.
Thank you so much for joining us today, Peter. It was a pleasure having you on the show. Peter George, everyone. And make sure to check out his book, The Captivating Public Speaker. Engage, impact, and inspire your audience every time. And as he said, make sure to check out his website, petergeorgepublicspeaking.com. Peter, thanks again so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure.
This is Sarah Adams and Dr. Elizabeth Preston for Hurley Write's Writing Docs podcast, signing off. To all of you, may your week be filled with good health and good writing. Have a good one, everybody.